Well, all right. Welcome back to the Survival and Basic Badass Podcast, Kevin and Chuck. Today, well, we're going to talk compost. We're going to dig deep into black gold, making your dirt what it should be. Um, Turns out everywhere you go, everybody's got different dirt, different soil, and you need to figure out what you can do. Now, we can always create good dirt, which is really what people are doing with compost. And anytime you add good dirt to whatever you have, you're either going to add more good dirt or you're going to make your less good dirt better. So you can't go wrong with that. However, you can also get your soil tested. Um, there's a bunch of ways to do that and a bunch of plate companies that will do it. My wife did it with the local exchange, um, the uh, the cooperative, right? The
Hmm.
whatever they call it,
Yeah, I know
and
you guys are into like that hippie stuff where you get out there and do your organics and all that
right.
sort of thing.
And she said that theirs wasn't as detailed as she would have liked. Like basically it was like, here's your pH, add a bunch of lime. Um, and that's something, but it's not everything.
Right.
There are companies and places that will do more detailed, and that's something you want to look into. And the thing is, if you have several different garden plots, you want to kind of, if they're in different areas, take a sample from each one. Or
Hmm.
maybe if you have a giant plot, you might even take a sample from each end, right?
Right.
Obviously, it's all about money and whatever, but you don't want to put all the effort into growing stuff and have a crappy yield. If you can double your yield by adding a bag of lime to it, that might be worth it. That's
Hmm.
something to look into. So
Right.
let's talk about our main focus here is compost. Um, Kevin, tell me, you love compost. You're
I've
kind of a
been
compost king. So what do you
I've
got
been
here?
composting for a long time here. So I mean the thing you want really is to start your compost bin. You don't have to have a bin. You don't have to have anything. You can just make a pile on the ground. It's fine. But you're going to want to add stuff that's going to decompose well. Um,
Okay.
so, I mean, you go with garden clipping or, vegetable clippings when you're making food. Um, really anything organic can go in there. I'll scoop this stuff out of my sink drain and throw it in there. Um, anything you want and to get it going. Now, we were talking about worms earlier, and
Yes,
to me, in my experience, worms are going to show up for your compost. A
that
lot of
is
people
right.
add worms, that's fine. Um, but to really get going with compost, it's really basic stuff. You want to, if you're just getting started, you want to keep out the onions and the citric and garlic because those things can have antibacterial effects that's going to slow down your progress. Now you can throw those things in there. Just don't start your compost bin off with that sort of stuff in it. You want to get things moving first before you start throwing everything in there.
Right. I did actually watch a video. Um, I don't know, it was Red something, like Red Law. I don't know what the guy's thing was, but anyway, he had a big thing about he had compost that he just told people it was a community kind of compost.
Hmm.
And he's like, I made a decision that people asked me, can I put this in the compost? Can I put that in the compost? And he was like, anything they asked, I just said yes.
Hmm.
And he goes, and it ended up working out. So he did have the meat and the whatever. Then the big thing you always hear about, oh, don't put meat in your
Right,
compost.
right. Don't
But
ever do that because it just gets a
because
little stinky. It's
it
not
gets stinky,
bad.
right?
Yeah.
That's the thing. Basically, he said later on he ended up changing his answer to anything that was alive, you can put in the
Hmm.
compost. And alive once, not
Right,
doesn't have to be alive right now,
right.
because obviously that's how that thing works. What you have to realize about compost is it's a lot like a human body, right? It's a living thing.
Hmm.
And the reason I say that is you're made up of all the different cells. They say that like what it's over half of your body is not you're
Right.
created by you, right? It's outside influenced and developed and whatever, and you have different microbes and little microorganisms all through you. That's the same thing you want in your compost. And
Hmm.
the idea is you want to keep everything in your body alive. You want to keep everything in your compost alive. And
Hmm.
that's the thing is, so Kevin said, you don't want to start out with something really citrus or acidic until you have enough stuff to kind of balance that out. You don't want to overwhelm it, right? With too
Hmm.
much in one direction. So
Right.
extreme temperatures can do this damage. Um, and the same thing, extreme pH, that kind of stuff. You have to be aware. So compost is definitely about a balance to kind of keep everything alive.
Right. Right. Um, yeah. So once you get your compost going, one of the things that you want to do is keep a good level of moisture in there. Right. And it's going to warm up on itself, but it you can help it out by putting your compost bin in in a sunny area, someplace
Yes.
where the sun's going to be beating on it. You want to encourage that warmth.
Yes.
I know sometimes during the colder months in the beginning of the year, sometimes I'll put some black cardboard on top of it just to get some of that sun to beat down on it, um, to get things warmed up in the beginning of the year. Because up here in upstate New York, we have some cold winters, and it can take a couple of months to really thaw out that compost bin and get things moving again.
Yeah, exactly. um I do know that I used to work in sewer plants, water treatment plants, and one of the facilities that I worked at, we used to compost the human waste, and that was
Right.
a big thing. And what we would do is we'd lay it out. We actually had I kind of take it from the beginning here, but try and make it quick. Basically, you have a tank called a digester, and all the thick stuff settles out down at the bottom and becomes like a thick sludge. And we would pump that thick sludge out of the bottom, and then we would go in and mix it with wood chips.
Hmm.
And we would put it in a big pile with the wood chips, and we would actually run airlines through the middle, and they would be basically like 4-inch or 6-inch pipe with perforated holes. And
Hmm.
believe it or not, we would watch the temperature, and we could adjust the air and control how the bugs and things are eating it, because the bugs are what's heating it up. That's why the
Right.
air was so important. The bugs eating the poos. And you would actually we could make it 140 160 degrees in the compost by too much air. And you actually had to watch that you didn't get too
Overheated.
crazy and catch on
Yeah.
fire or kill everything. And you
Right.
can really you have to pay attention. But the idea is the same. It's all about keeping it alive. And then we'd take it and sift out the wood chips and reuse the wood chips, and then we'd try and sell the poo dust
The
to
human waste.
people
Yeah.
for fill, and nobody would ever buy it. And they were
Yeah.
like, "We can't just give it away. This is black gold."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Well, no, you nobody's
Yeah,
taking
it's
it
called
though."
nightshade. Yeah, it's
Um,
it's that's how you spread parasites by
in
playing
Amer
with your poop.
Yeah, in America, we don't use it's weird. We can't use human waste for growing food for people to sell to people.
Right.
Now, what you can do is you can use human waste to grow corn to feed to your cows to
That's
then
okay.
sell to people. That
Hmm.
that's okay. But you
It's the
can't
circle of life, man.
go the other way. Now, if you lived in Japan, you could use human waste to grow your food for people. So whatever, to each their own, right?
Hmm.
Um, but I don't recommend putting your own poo in
Yeah, let's
the
start off.
compost
We should
pile.
start off with just mentioning that. Don't put your own shit in the compost bin. It's not going to work out good. It's going to, yeah, not good.
Right.
Not your
All right.
neighbor's poop either. I mean, not just your own. just human poop
It's
in
no
general.
people poo, period.
Dog shit, not good. You want to go with if you're gonna throw shit in there, try to go with chicken shit or cow shit or even rabbit poop is good for it.
All right. That's tip number one. Um,
Hmm.
so basically, the way it works, compost is should be like a 30-to-1 carbon to nitrogen mixture.
Right.
And a lot of people say, well, you need an even mix of green and brown. So, what are they talking about with green and brown, Kevin? What are some greens? What do they
Well,
mean?
yeah. So greens would be things like lawn clippings,
Yep.
the vegetables, like I said earlier, the vegetables that you cut up, the parts you don't use are the vegetables for your cooking. Um, things like
Fruits,
that that are
vegetables.
that are
Yeah.
that are alive and semi fresh still.
Now,
Um,
they'd also add coffee grounds. I know you're like, well, wait, Chuck, that's brown. I know. I
mhm.
can't help it.
Green is
Seaweed.
moist.
Yes.
Hmm.
Seaweed, feathers, plant cuttings, hair,
Hmm.
fresh manure is considered a green.
Right.
That's about what I got on greens.
Right.
Browns, on the other hand, you'd be looking at like leaves, hay and straw, paper and cardboard.
Hmm.
Eggshells are considered a brown. Tea
Right. Okay.
bags. So it's weird. Coffee grounds go green and tea bags go brown. I've often, I thought about, tea. There's a reason we threw it in the harbor. It's on the other end of things.
Right.
Corn cobs are also brown and sawdust. Um, to really understand it, it basically there is a whole formula, and you can really kind of dig deep into it. Um, Basically, the scraps are going to be different ratios of carbon and nitrogen, and like I said, we want to shoot for 30-to-1.
Hmm.
And so coffee and food scraps, you're looking at like 20-to-1. So that's going to add more nitrogen than the norm. Grass clippings are actually 15-to-1. So that's helpful.
Hmm.
Manure is 5-to-1. So manure is going to take you the one way, but then we can go full circle here, and leaves are like 60-to-1.
Right.
So if you're adding a good mix of manure and leaves, you can balance that out and get to that ratio. Paper, sawdust, paper is about 100-to-1. Sawdust is 300-to-1. Um, but basically, you need to find that happy balance that's going to get you close to that 30-to-1 where you have carbon and nitrogen.
Right.
And another thing important to your compost is air. And you want to make sure that you're turning it and
Right.
cycling it through. They usually say in a perfect world you're doing it at least once a week.
Hmm.
I've heard people say daily. I think too much is never too much. Like I
Right.
think you can get away with morning,
Hmm.
but I don't know.
Yeah, I know when my compost is really cooking and it's doing good and it's nice and warm, you know, you can get out there and turn it over as often as you want and it's going to keep moving. But when you're trying to get things started up, you just, I mean, you can turn it over as much as you want, but you might want to you don't need to do it as frequently. Let it get started and start cooking first. When you have a good mix in there, it's going to take off. I know, you know, composting in the north is a lot different though, because once things start freezing up here, that's it. There's no compost isn't gonna keep composting. It's just gonna stay what it is and be frozen until things start thawing out. Now it'll stay thawed a lot longer than most other stuff because it's already warming up. But once it
Right.
freezes, that's it for the year. That's it until spring comes.
Now, one of the secrets that I discovered is I was putting a ton of effort into into putting leaves and all this stuff, gathering it up, setting up a compost pile, and doing this. And then it occurred to me, my wife was like, "Why don't you just put the leaves all over the giant field, and then take the tractor with the tiller and till the leaves
Right into the
right
dirt.
into the dirt?" And then it starts breaking it up. Now my soil is very clay heavy. And so obviously I want to break it up and get air into there. I actually
Right.
have good pH and things are very good in my soil, but it's so clumpy and so hard. And even when the sun gets on it and it really dries out, it just turns into like rocks. It just feels solid
Right.
and like you can barely break it apart. And that's where that dumping that the leaves on there. And legitimately, I would say I put a foot of leaves because I have giant oak trees in the front yard. I'll put a foot of leaves on top. So I mean, you're walking and sloshing through, ridiculous amounts of leaves. I'll
Right.
go in and till it, and it just pretty much looks like dirt, like immediately after I till it.
Hmm.
And then I will, come springtime, you don't even see the leaves under the soil. There may be one or two, pieces on top, but as
Right.
I till it again, it all kind of breaks in. But every year I get a dramatically better. Now, I feel like at this point I have to mention people get worked up about tilling, right?
Hmm.
Oh, no tilling, tilling's bad. I heard it. And that's there is some legitimacy to that.
Hmm.
um, every time, remember I mentioned that it was like an ecosystem, right? And it all kind of has to work together and stay alive
Hmm.
and that kind of thing. So that matters. But and when you till it, you disrupt that ecosystem. You
Right.
really disturb and slow down the growth. So you don't want to get crazy and overdo it with your tilling. And you don't want to go in because it looks good, right? When you go out and
Right.
till it,
It's all
everything
broken up.
looks awesome.
Looks nice.
It's like,
Yeah.
oh, look, all that grass grew and I'm getting weeds and I can go in and till it and make it pretty. And that's okay to till it. Like, you have to find the balance. I don't know where the perfect balance is. I
Hmm.
know, like, again, I mean, what does tilling mean? If I go over it with the tiller, I mean, obviously you're breaking up the soil, but what I mean is if I go over it once, I might have to go over it 3 times to really mix up the soil and get
Hmm.
everything in there, and compacted. So
Right.
in my mind, I'm calling that I till it one time,
Right.
and I'll till it one time a season, but obviously I may run over it with the tiller 2 or 3 times to really mix it
Hmm.
up, and that's what I'm getting at there. Um, and I don't know that I'm 100% right. I know
Right.
these guys that are, worked up. What I do know is when I have a 200-foot by 200-foot garden, going through and using a broad fork and lifting it all up and getting the air in there is a lot of work on your back. And I
Yeah.
just know that I can't get it done. But if I go through with the tractor and I break it up, I can do it in 2 hours.
Hmm.
And that's a big difference. It's 2 hours versus 5 or 6 days of hard labor.
Right.
I do have a life. So I don't know what's right in a perfect world. And if I had a tiny garden, yes. If you just kind of
Hmm.
go through and break it up on your own, that'd probably
Right.
be the way. But if you're doing it at any scale, um, now manure is another thing. So we talked about it a little bit, but so slow burn there mentioned we could use rabbit manure because it compost. It's ready to go in the garden like right away, and
Right.
that's one of my plugs for rabbits. That was
Hmm.
the only way I sold the wife on. We need to grow rabbits. And I haven't done it yet. Every day I'm about to pull the trigger. I think today may be the day on the triggers. She even bought me like rabbit waterers and things like that. We're
Oh,
like
you're all
getting
set to
closer.
have
Yeah.
the.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
getting closer every day. And I'm kind of like waiting for a little bit warmer weather to kind of get started. But I see the rabbits for sale around me and I'm getting excited about it. I already got, people lined up to buy it at work and that kind of thing, people to
Hmm.
trade beef and different things with. So rabbits are definitely coming. But there's different degrees. Like you don't want to put horse manure directly in your garden that you're planting that day,
Right.
right? That's too much. It's going to be too caustic and too I don't know,
Yeah.
too hot,
Basic.
too
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
And you have that kind of trouble. So that's something to be aware of. Chicken poop is kind of like a medium. horses and cows were kind of on the one end. Then you have like chicken poop in the middle where it's a little bit easier on your garden. And then you have your like rabbits or something like that where it's really broken down, when it goes in. And the trick is to like find that balance. Pigs are another one where it's like more broken down. They're kind of in that middle with chickens. They say that pigs will actually eat like horse and cow manure because it's like 30% not digested,
Right.
and the pigs will digest it the rest of the way. So they say like put the cows or the cows and the horses through a field, then you put the pigs through a field, then you put the rabbits, or sorry, the chickens,
Hmm.
and you kind of go through that cycle, and it just breaks it down more and more. And that's something to look into. uh Thoughts on that, Kevin? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, you want to be careful when you're dealing with manure, depending on the animal it comes from. Um, it's the same thing with when you clean the hay out of your chicken coop. You
Right.
know, you don't want to throw that directly in your garden. You want to give that some time and mix that in with your compost first. And same thing with horse manure.
Right.
But you know, it's
The
different.
rule
It's different with different poop. You know,
exactly. The
and
rules
you want to
keep
stick with
changing. Yeah.
yeah, you want to stick with poop that came from animals that eat uh
Grass or
greens. You don't want
yeah,
you don't want
a meat eater.
carnivores, meat eaters poop. Don't use your dog and your cat shit. That's not gonna be helpful for anybody.
It's not helpful, but again, over time, whatever.
Hmm.
It'll break down. But that's the thing. The more extreme ends, the rules seem to keep changing all the time. So it's hard to say, where the numbers lie. But um, typically, it used to be, oh, your horse and cow poop, you want to let go a year. I
Hmm.
would say a season. Usually between, if I have stuff, I stop adding to it in the fall. I think throwing it in the garden in the springtime or whatever and things, you're probably pretty good, but I don't know.
Hmm.
Again, it's everybody has their own opinions. Um, but like I said, a year you're definitely going to be safe on the composting. You want to give it some time, and it depends what else you mix with it, how much you break it down. If it's mixed with a ton of leaves. Obviously, the more you break down something, uh, the smaller
Yeah,
the pieces are, the
yeah. If you're
better it's
gonna
going
throw
to
leaves
be
in
in.
there,
Yeah,
it's a good idea to just run over those leaves with a lawnmower first. Chop them up a little bit and
right,
then toss them in there. If you just rake up leaves in the fall and throw them in your compost, it's gonna pack down and it's gonna get kind of like slimy and gross and all stuck together, and it's not gonna break down the way you want it to break down unless you
right.
chop those leaves up a little bit before you throw them in there.
We, I know for us, like, and again, I have, the toughest leaves you can deal with because I have like the big oak leaves, right?
Hmm.
So
Right.
they're huge and they're thick. You got to work them to break them up. Um, those, like I said, I'll put directly into the big garden in the fall. I mean, it's got to be, and then the tiller is still breaking it down. It's just like Kevin saying, running it over with the mower. It's still tearing it up, but it's not tearing it up as much as I would like. I'd love if
Hmm.
it was like a crushed powder kind of thing. I know when my wife directly adds it to the garden, she hits it with the mower. We have a mower with a bag.
Hmm.
um, so we debate over what I said and if I listened to her or not, but somehow she has an electric mower that's very narrow and she can go in the garden and do herself.
Hmm.
And I think she has the electric mower because she wanted an electric mower. She said, I don't want something, I'm going to kill my shoulder and all this stuff starting.
Hmm.
And she thinks that it's because I don't listen to her and she just wanted a small one and she wished she had one that actually worked. I seem to remember saying that electric mowers don't really work,
Yeah, they
and
don't really work.
but we won't get into that. The bottom
Right.
line
Fair
is,
enough.
moving right along, right?
Hmm.
That's the answer. Um, but anyway, so a good mower with a bag, if you can chop that up and break it in, if she's adding it directly, you would want to you would want to cut it up with the mower and make it as small and fine as you can. She loves to cover around to keep leaves from grow or weeds from growing. So she'll
Hmm.
cover leaves around the plants, especially in the winter to keep things warm and
Right.
things like that. Extend it as long as you can. But
Yeah. No, I mean, and it's a good way to keep, keep the soil warm and moist. Having something like that on top of everything, to keep stuff from evaporating off so fast. And it's, we actually, if you listen to all the nerds about agriculture, we actually have a fertilizer dirt crisis. We're in a crisis right now because,
well,
things are,
Ukraine's part of that. Yeah.
yeah, well, it is part of that. Fertilizer prices are going through the roof right now. If you're planning on buying some bags of dirt this spring, I would recommend start composting now because prices are not going to be ideal for it. You used to be able to get um, a cubic foot of dirt from the hardware store for about $2, and it's not going to be that same price this year.
Yeah.
Um, Now, there's a few things here, a few tips on getting your soil ready for your garden. Um, Now, we talked about this briefly in the beginning. pH, your pH for your soil. You can pay to have your soil tested. You can do it yourself. The truth is, your soil's pH um, is probably about the right range. You want it between like 5.5 and 7. Um, it's a little bit acidic, you know. Most plants like that. Different plants want different acidity, and you can spaz out all you want over it. It's not really that big of a deal if your soil's not crazy, um, caustic or real high in pH. It's not going to be a big deal. Um, Obviously, add compost. And we've been talking about that. You want to mix that in with the natural soil that's growing there, or the natural soil that's there already. Um, Now, you were talking about adding leaves on top of it.
Yes.
Mulch. It works the same way as mulch.
Right.
You can get mulch from, one of um, your local transfer stations. Your local waste places where you take your garbage or your
Yes.
trash. They'll usually have it there for pretty cheap prices if you have a truck and you can throw it in the back and move it yourself.
Now, if you can
Um,
find a guy who has grass clippings or a lawn business where they actually collect it, um, I don't. I live in kind of a poor
mhm,
area where there's a lot of lawn businesses, but they're not somebody who's like taking away your grass clippings. They're just kind of zipping through with their zero turn and leaving
right.
it like it is. But guys who are collecting the grass clippings, if you can get those and add it to your compost is amazing. Um, People will, if you have a small enough yard where you can't get your own leaves and your own stuff, believe me, people will be happy to let you come take their leaves away for them.
Right.
You can come have tons of mine, and I'm still trying to compost everything. I just can't even, it's overwhelming. I actually got one of those leaf sweepers that like scoop it up behind the four
Hmm.
wheeler or whatever, and it still is overwhelming. I can't unload it fast enough. It's just driving out, getting it, driving
Right.
it back. It's not even like you have to do any of the raking, and it still is like, oh, it's overwhelming. I spend days.
Yeah.
I'm actually leaving from doing this podcast to go in and picking up more leaves. I just keep going. Um,
Yeah.
Slowburn mentioned that the his dad had pigs and they would actually put him in the garden plot at the end of the season and they would go in and kind of root up, eat all the rest of it, the scraps, and kind of tear it up, and they would just like leave the poop right on the top, and come springtime it was ready to go. And I think that's pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
In a way, the pigs are tilling the soil. They
Hmm.
are turning it over and moving it and stomping it around.
Right.
uh but and he mentioned the rabbits eating grass clippings and pretty much anything. Rabbits are awesome, as I point that out. But
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever heard me say it, but rabbits are awesome.
All right. So another big thing that you want to do with your soil is you want to make sure you don't pack it down. You'll see a lot of a lot of the bigger farmers, they'll have uh, tractors will have bigger and bigger wheels on them now. It used to be the old tractors you used to see, they would have kind of narrow wheels. And now you look at the tractors that are in the fields and they're real big, and that's to spread out the weight. Um, but really, the best thing is if you're running a tractor, don't plan on planning where the tires of that tractor were going, unless you're pulling a tiller behind it and digging it
Right.
all up behind you after you go.
That's it.
Um,
I mean, a tiller is going to be wider than the tractor, where
mhm,
everything looks nice behind you. But yeah,
right.
you want to think about where you're driving and whatever, and obviously where you're walking. You
Yeah,
want
and
it as
when you have soil that's real packed down, the moisture isn't going to get in, and it's not going to be able to get the nutrients down to the roots of the plant that you're planting there.
yeah,
So you just want to be conscious of that. You want to rotate your crops every year too. You don't want to plant the same vegetables in the same area year after year. Um, different plants draw different nutrients out of it, and it can just become, it can just become uh, free of anything that you want in there, the soil to grow, because
right,
it's going to be consumed by the plants. Um,
right.
uh, at the end of the year, now I haven't done this, but at the end of the year, they say you should be planting
Cover crop.
broadleaf plants, yeah, cover crops in your garden. I'm gonna have
Yes.
to try that this year, but
You
things
can
like
pick out some
radishes,
that right
yeah,
that end up being good rabbit food is
right
the key.
there you go,
And
there you go. Um, And most of your manure that you're adding, you want to let it age a little bit. We talked about that earlier in the podcast. There's some manure that you can use right away, but some of it you really want it to have time to break down, like cow shit. Um, it's going to have a lot of undigested stuff in there, and it still needs a little bit of time to break down after you're done with it, or when you get it. I mean, so all in all, I mean, it's February. It's almost time to start getting your little plants that you grow indoors, your little seedlings going. I'm always excited for spring and gardening
yes.
season. I'm a bit of a nerd like that. I like to get my hands in the dirt and do all those things. But you know, with the prices of food right now, it's probably worthwhile to grow a few of your own vegetables.
Yeah.
Chuck, you got
Uh,
anything else you want to add?
I think that's what I got on composting. Um, but yeah, it's just it really is a way to make all the effort that you're putting into the garden yield, that much more. We're all about getting sustainable and taking care of things. And we all know that food prices, I think they're saying the grocery inflation is about 11%.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
things are going up. We want to keep it under control and reasonable. And this is a great place to start.
yeah.
Um,
When you're going through the grocery store, keep your keep your eye on the prices of on beef and pork. They're going to be fluctuating a lot this year. So just if you see cheap prices on beef or pork, pick it up
Cash
now
in.
because it might not be the case later in the year.
Right.
Get your
And
freezers ready.
make sure you're getting a deer every year, or six, whatever. You do you.
Hmm.
Um, they say you don't need 30 rounds to shoot a deer, but if there's a lot in the backyard, you never know what you have to do,
Yeah,
right?
sometimes you
Um,
gotta get that one that you adjusted to auto and light them up, man.
there you go. Or wild hogs, right?
Yeah.
They say pigs are the dream. There you go.
Hmm.
Um, anyway, no, that's it. If prices are going up, I was all proud because I finally got an egg. I just put a light in the chicken coop, and we hadn't had eggs in about, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks. And so I was like, eggs are ridiculous. I shouldn't be paying for them. So I threw a light in the chicken coop and
Got them going again.
finally got some going. And I'm like, I came in, I was like, I'm the smartest man in the world. Look at me, I have an egg.
Uh,
And yeah, so things are on the up. But
yeah, I
that's
got
that's
a
yeah,
a solar light that I just hooked up
yeah,
for my, it. charges up all day and then comes on when the sun goes down, kind of keep
Right.
things moving in there. Um, it's one of those things. The ground starts freezing, and you have to start. They're not
Yeah.
going to be getting their own food as much anymore. You can let them
Not for
roam
you.
around the yard and stuff, but they're not really going to be finding a lot out there once the ground's frozen.
Yeah.
So you have to be conscientious of what you're feeding those animals. Make sure they've got good calcium and good stuff for their shells and all the nutrients, the correct nutrients they need. Just
Uh, uh,
wintertime's always tough on all the homestead projects.
yeah. No, that's awesome. Um, so next week you're going to be excited. I know you were like, well, compost, we're talking about the dirt. Isn't that awesome? Next week, we're going to talk AR-15s, suppressors, tax stamps, how to get it done. We're going to get you there. We're going to make it the best springtime you ever had. So if you have questions, concerns, you can email us at preppingbadass@gmail.com. You can sign up at preppingbadass.com to the email list to make sure you don't miss a trick. Also find badass gear. Maybe you want a don't give them an inch coffee mug. You wanted
Mhm.
one of those. That could happen for you. Otherwise, I would say stay safe and we'll talk to you guys next week.